We will get started, even though people are still coming in, but we don't want to get too far behind schedule because we have a lot to pack in today. So welcome to everyone. My name is Lisa, and I'm with the Office of Safeguards of ADB, and we are here to talk about the Environmental and Social Framework, ESF. If I can get the next slide. I don't know why the clicker's not working. There we go. And I will first turn it over to Joyce, who will give us some opening remarks. Oops. Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to say a few housekeeping. The slides are getting messed up. So just so you know, you've been here for the last 2 days, so you probably know if you go outside, there's a courtyard if there's any emergencies, and restrooms are here to the left and to the left. And please keep your phone on silent. If you need to take a call, please take it outside. Thanks. Joyce?
Hi, good morning, colleagues, partners, and friends. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all today. After the energy and momentum of the main sessions of the Business Opportunities Fair, we're excited to keep the conversation going on the ADB Safeguards policy, the new environmental and social framework. We're especially encouraged by the enthusiasm that over the past 2 days, it was wonderful to meet you, exchange ideas, and hear your perspectives firsthand. The strong turnout yesterday and your presence today show us something important, that safeguards is not just a technical requirement. It's an area of genuine interest and commitment among partners like you. This level of engagement tells us that this is the right conversation at the right time. Now, over the past few days, we've talked about opportunities to work with ADB through procurement and consulting. Today, we look at what makes those opportunities truly successful. Beyond the contracts, beyond the financing, it's safeguards, it's how we treat people, communities, and environment that makes projects resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. As you know, ADB's new ESF will take effect on January 1, 2026, replacing our current safeguard policy statement. This is just more than a policy update. It's actually a transformation, an opportunity to align with global standards, strengthen country systems, make sure every project delivers lasting benefits without leaving people or nature behind. Let me walk you through our agenda today. Next slide, please. We begin with the big picture. In Module 1, Beatrice and Felix will discuss the value proposition of the environment and social framework, its key features, how the ESF is structured, the environmental and social standards it introduces, what makes it globally aligned, and why it matters for ownership, risk management, and sustainable development outcomes. Understanding this foundation is essential for designing projects that are both bankable and sustainable. Next, we'll dive into Module 2, where Felix will discuss the sustainable procurement and contractor management. Here, we focus on preparing responsive bids that meets ADB's safeguard requirements, which helps avoid costly implementation delays. We'll also explore how to manage safeguard risks during project execution, ensuring that contractors are equipped to deliver on their commitments. This is key to maintaining compliance and community trust throughout the project life cycle. In Module 3, on Environmental and Social Management Systems, or ESMS, Beatrice will show how organizations can start thinking about systems that help manage risks more systematically and enhance credibility with clients and financiers. This session demonstrates how an ESMS can help organizations systematically identify, assess, and manage ENS risks. For contractors and implementing partners, adopting an ESMS is a strategic investment. It enhances risk management, improves performance, builds credibility with clients and financiers. Now, people are at the heart of every project. Hence, in Module 4, Cassiat will talk about worker health and safety, labor conditions, management risks of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, or SEA, along with Felix, who will discuss. They will provide practical guidance on developing construction, environmental, and social management plans, or ESMPs, labor management plans, and SEA risk mitigation strategies. These tools are essential for creating safe and inclusive project environments. Finally, we turn to Module 5 to Darshani, who will talk about managing biodiversity and pollution abatement. This session focuses on minimizing ecological impacts and pollution through effective implementation of environmental and social management plans during construction and operations. It reinforces the importance of environmental stewardship in infrastructure development and natural resource management. At the end of these modules, we'll invite you to group discussions in your own group tables. Lisa, together with our speakers and our safeguards team, will be joining you, and you can raise questions, share your reflections on the modules that were presented today. We hope that this will, give you a chance to discuss and reflect on the things that makes it challenging to implement safeguards, and also to find solutions on how to address these challenges. So let me leave you with this thought. Safeguards is not only about compliance, they are about collaboration, accountability, and leaving a positive legacy for the communities and ecosystems touched by our projects. So on behalf of ADB, thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I just want to get a sense of who's in the room. Can I just get a raise of hands if you're from a consulting firm or an independent consultant? Okay, so quite a few. And from those, how many of you are doing environmental and social risk assessment work? Just one. Okay, so some of the others, you're doing some kind of input on design, engineering design type of consulting? Okay, great. So I hope this will be interesting for you. And for the others who are from other organizations, can I just say, are there any CSOs, civil society organizations? One. Any academe? One. Any civil works contractors? Okay, great. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. We're packing a lot into 3 hours, so I hope you can stick with us for that 3 hours. At the end, we're going to have, as Joyce mentioned, we'll have a little key takeaway session with the flip charts. So as we're going, if something hits you as a key takeaway, you can jot it down on the Post-it note that's on the table. And then also keep in mind that this is being recorded, because we wanted to share it more widely with others who couldn't be with us today. So it'll be shown on YouTube. So I hope everyone's okay with that. And then also, I just wanted to get a sense, too, of where people are from. Just raise your hand if you're from outside the Philippines, if you came from overseas. So we have a few, and then I guess the rest, so about maybe almost half from outside the Philippines. So thank you for those who came from far. And those who are in the Philippines, you had to deal with traffic, so we appreciate that as well. So now I'm happy to turn it over to our next speaker, Beatrice, who will be, sorry, we have a mentee. We also wanted to quickly get a sense of what challenges you've faced already in the work that you're doing. So if you could pull out your phones and capture the QR code just so we can get an idea of what some of the issues are that you have that we can address. And Jen in the back. Oh, there we go. We're getting some. Getting some interesting points. Great, so I think Thank you for those. It's interesting. We share some of the same concerns and face these things in our work. And we're doing sessions like this to try to address some of these, but also in the work that we do in the field to address these. So Beatrice, could we ask you to come up now? Beatrice is the director for our private sector and Pacific operations.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for doing that room check. So it's nice to know there are a lot of people who are working on design of projects. And one of our challenges is that mainstreaming E&S requirements into the design. So it's nice that you're here. All right. So we have a new, upgraded, snazzy safeguards policy. So our last policy was done in 2009. So now we have a new policy that sets more detail of what's required, hopefully helping borrowers and clients and the people who support them to, what really are the requirements of ADB. So, so it was approved by the board last year in November, and it will be implemented in January, 1st of January next year. So any projects that are concept approved by January 1 next year, the new policy will apply. In this policy, we have a vision statement, what we're aiming for, and then we have the E&S policy that sets out what ADB's requirements are and what we are responsible for. And then we have the 10 environmental and social standards that clearly guides borrowers and clients on what's required for each of those standards. We also have special detailed requirements for different financial modalities and products. And we have the prohibited investment activities list. That's not unlike what we have now, but it's an updated one. So this is just the architecture of our new framework, where we have our aspirations in the vision statement, and then we have mandatory requirements, which is basically the policies, the standards, the requirements for financial modalities and products, and then the prohibited investments activities lists. Then we also have, we're working on updating the operations manual and staff instructions. These are mandatory requirements that will be set out in those documents. And then we have non-mandatory guidance notes and tools and good practice notes to help with the implementation and mainstreaming of these requirements. But these are non-mandatory, these are guidance documents. So what's new, I guess, and why is this better than the last one? Because you'd always want to see if there was an improvement, right? So this is improving on the last one. So now, somebody mentioned, the inflexibility of the requirements. So this new framework allows us to make more risk-based decisions and approaches when we're doing due diligence for a project and also implementing a project. So you can front-load or back-end requirements depending on the risk of the project. So if you have a lower risk project, some supplementary assessment or surveys can probably be done after approval. At the moment, with the old policy, everything had to be done before approval, right? All our assessments and all the plans had to be done before approval. And now we can kind of work together to address the key risks, and if some risks are not priority ones, you can do that later. We also are broadly more aligned now with the other MDBs, so it's aligned more with the World Bank's ESF, with IFC's performance standards, EBRD's performance standards, which gives, a shared language so borrowers and clients can, it doesn't get too confusing. And also when we're co-lending, it lends itself to a simplified approach to co-lending. We also have, this is a big news for private sector projects, what used to be category A projects are now high-risk projects. They are now required to be disclosed 60 days before board approval, whereas in our last policy, it was 120 days, which was out of step with the other MDBs. For sovereign projects that are high risk, we still require the 120 days before board approval. And then there's also opportunity to get material alignment or consistency with borrower systems. And that can be applied per standard and can be applied per project. So if you've had material consistency, say on labor, for example, then That lessens what you have to do for due diligence and assessment and monitoring. It just lessens the work to get the project through approval and through implementation. So our risk classification process has also changed. So in the SPS, we had risk classifications for environment, involuntary resettlement, and indigenous peoples. Now we have a unified categorization of risk, and so the highest risk drives that unified classification. It's now split from 3 to 4, and this just reflects, before we had A, B, and C, and in the B band, you had really, relatively lower risk projects, and then higher risk Bs. So lower risk Bs and higher risk Bs, but then the requirements would be the same. So in this new 4-tiered risk categorization, it splits those things out. So then you can more adequately resource projects depending on the risks. Yeah. Similarly, for FIs, financial intermediaries, we also have 3 tiers, 1, 2, and 3, and that's just based on activities that are going to be funded from the FI. So that's not much different from what we have now. So it follows that same risk. The whole point of classification of risk is so that we can all figure out what we need to do, how much effort we need to put in place to assess and implement projects. Higher risk, need more resources. And I guess for the others who haven't seen the 10 standards before, there's nothing really super new in the ESF that wasn't touched on before in the SPS. We still have the involuntary resettlement standard, which maps out to SR2 before, and then we have the indigenous people standard, which maps out to SR3 in the SPS. The other 6 standards were incorporated in the environment standard in the SPS before. So that's just split out to give more guidance and more detail and also align us with the other MDBs. Then you have 2 standards that are really cross-cutting, and that's around having management systems and doing stakeholder engagement and grievance mechanisms. So that cuts across all standards. So these are the 10 standards, not unlike the other MDBs. And I guess you can see here we've split out labor and working conditions, resource conservation and pollution, health and safety and security, biodiversity and natural resource management, cultural heritage, and climate change. So those 6 used to be lumped up into the environment requirements in SPS. And now we have more guidance around those focus areas. Okay, so we have a little bit more detail in the new standards. First, there's, we had labor and working conditions as part of the SPS before, and as part of our social protection policy as well. But now there's a little bit more guidance of, who are considered project workers, for example, and what do we do with workers in the supply chain. So that's included in this standard. We also have explicit mention of specific risks associated with sexual exploitation and harassment. These used to be covered under community health and safety in general, but because of, I guess, there's more focus on that now. There are more women in the workforce. We also know the vulnerabilities of specific segments of our communities. So this is now explicitly stated in a few of our standards. Cultural heritage preservation, it specifically says tangible and intangible cultural heritage. That was also in the SPS before, but there's a little bit more guidance around that now. In the biodiversity standard, now we have some zones where we're saying we can't do projects in these areas. And these are really areas that are internationally recognized as really important areas, like Alliance of Zero Extinction Sites, World Heritage Sites, and free-flowing rivers. We also have, depending on the habitats you're going to be impacting or the biodiversity values you'll be impacting or potentially impacting, there's no net loss requirements, but also net gain requirements depending on what that is. So that's aligned a little bit more with IFC's Performance Standard 6. And then we also have a little bit more guidance around maintaining the benefits of ecosystem services and promoting sustainable management and the use of living natural resources. So there's a little bit more guidance around that and how you would assess that and how you would then mitigate for that, for any impacts to that. And then in stakeholder engagement, which we also had in SPS, but explicitly now says that you have to have safe spaces where there's no threat of reprisal. So we used to have, in the old SPS, we used to say meaningful consultation, free of coercion or intimidation, right? So it's similar, but we're just a little bit more explicit in this new standard. We also have guidance on confidentiality and data privacy protocols, which are important when there are areas that reprisal risk is quite high, or areas that are quite sensitive, so incidents that involve sensitive risks, which include sexual exploitation and harassment. And then, then we have specific requirements around the different types of financial modalities. So it just gives, a little bit more guidance on how we would treat each of these modalities. Okay. And then we're near the end of this segment, but in the prohibited investment list, that's been upgraded now to align with the energy policy that came out in the last few years. And it now states that there's no new coal-fired power generation or coal-fired heating plants that are going to be supported by ADB funding. We also don't support coal mining, processing, storage, and transportation. We also will not support upstream or midstream oil projects and natural gas exploration or drilling. And then we also prohibit financing of the production of or trade in or use of asbestos fibers. So if you have a project that's demolishing something and there's asbestos in it, that doesn't fall under this, right? So you would still do and treat the demolition with that hazard properly. It's not prohibited by this list. So next, so we are hurling through the capacity building program for the ESF because we only have a few more months in the year. So we are doing internal capacity building. We're capacity building at our partner DMCs, our private sector clients. We're meeting you guys today, and that's part of capacity building and training. From January 1, ESF will apply to any projects that are concept approved then. And then we'll have more years of trying to catch up and build capacity as we go along. Okay, well, that's it. So we've already done that, Menti. So over to you, Lisa. Oh, yeah. We have, I think, maybe 2 minutes for questions if you'd like to throw them at me right now. And we can also have, if you're a little bit shy this morning, we're also just sitting over here and you can ask questions. But it's nice to share questions and answers in a big group. Okay, maybe something will come up after the next few sessions. All right, thank you.
And we also have a parking lot in the back, so if you wanted to write a question on a Post-it note, you could stick it on that flip chart in the back, maybe during the break. But don't be shy to ask your questions, or even share some of your own experience that might be relevant, maybe referencing some of the things you brought up in the Menti, talking about challenges. That would be welcome. So I'm pleased to introduce Felix. Let's go to the next slide. Can we go to the next set of slides? This is on sustainable procurement. Just get our slides up. So Felix is a principal safeguard specialist working in the Office of Safeguards. He's mainly working in the front office, handling, wearing lots of different hats. And today he's pitching in on procurement. Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice, for that in-depth intro into the ESF. I know people still waking up. So if you feel shy, you can write your questions on the Flipboard chat. But it's going to be quite bumpy now, so wake up. I got a sense that we got quite a few consultants here, and I can see some consultants that I know them already. So I don't know which role or which capacity of consultancy service you're providing, but if you're working with a borrower, you're one of the implementers. So I'll be using the word implementers of ADB contracts. The framework, the policy is important, but how do we implement it? It comes through contract. And a lot of you are here today or the last couple of days as a business opportunities fair, so you're looking for business. Yes, I can see a lot of knocking of head. I wish I had business to give you, and I know of one of the consultants you have been engaging with already, but then you're here looking for business. None of these businesses come without T's and C's, terms and conditions. And these are some of the terms and conditions. So we're going to walk you through, and I'm not going to go into details of the procurement because that has been the bread and butter for the last couple of days. So presumably most of you would have heard a lot about the framework, standard bidding document, but I'm going to walk you through within the lens of safeguards. So at least you get an idea of what are the requirements bespoke to safeguards whenever you win one of ADB's contracts, okay? So let's go on this journey. I'll be running through it, but I'll be stopping and focusing on some of the key points, conscious of time. I'm not going to be the bad person standing between you and your coffee break and Lisa. So, there are a lot of players within the framework of how you win a contract and how you implement it. And what you see on the board there, we use IFI because it could be anyone. This is here in case it's ADB. And then you have all of these players coming in, and then the contract. The client is a borrower, which could be a government agency. And then you have sometimes a private corporate entity or financing institution. And then the developer comes in under project finance. There's a contract, and then the project goes on. I'm going to be running through this, so don't worry. We are one of the signatories to the MDB Joint Statement of Sustainable Procurement. So what you do here and what you hear would not be different from when you work with ADB, the World Bank Group, for instance, or you work with IFC or Inter-American Development Bank. All of us are signatories to the same framework to ensure consistency across the board. And that's the essence. And this is now being given cascaded into safeguards. So very soon we will be hearing things like frameworks agreement between us and the World Bank, maybe IFC and EBRD and something similar, or with the help of minimizing multiple requests from our borrowers and clients. Sustainability in public procurement. Sustainability is a word that has been used over the last 2, 3, 4 decades, and it means different things within different contexts. But now I think the push is more towards what we call value for money, or what maybe you may have heard of, which is the MPC, merit point criteria for procurement. So the days are now moving towards a least cost-based procurement. We're not going to be giving contract and consultancy contracts to people who quote the least. It's going to be other factors which will be non-price. So this is a big of a change from the way things have been done in the past. So non-priced criteria, but yet they will be factoring so strongly in the evaluation on who wins the contract. And this is where we're moving into. So, the pyramid you see there tells you what is supply-driven and what is also contract-driven. And we'll be walking through this journey, so you could ignore if you don't understand this. As a projectized development institution, we work project. And what you see on the board is our typical project cycle. My cursor is green, so if I put it here, you don't see it. I'll try to see it. But in the middle circle, you can see some of the thematic areas that we try to mainstream in our project cycle. So there is efficiency, there's quality, there's economy. One of the big factors for the MPC, that's the merit point criteria, is value for money. And value for money does not just look at the cost. I just want to make that quite very clear. But in itself, it has to be transparent, and it also has to be fair. Now, we start engaging with our borrowers and clients through what we call country partnership strategy. That's the one at the red top over there. And this is where we have a 4 or 5 year program on areas where we would develop as a partnership strategy. Within it comes the plans, and that's where our teams then engage with our borrowers and clients to see where we can do business. One of the key entry points for procurement is when we develop what we call concept papers. Beatrice just mentioned a key milestone for effectivity of the ESF That's 1st January 2026. So when we develop a concept, that's what then triggers a lot of the initiations. And for procurement, that is a stage where you see something called SPP, Strategic Procurement Planning stage. This is where we mainstream. Very upstream end of the conceptualization of the project, what are the procurement criteria that we're going to be looking for in terms of reference, qualifications, and everything else. And then it goes on before we develop a procurement plan. And then from there, we then request for proposals from the likes of you. So you see something on ADB's procurement page, they look for consultancy service, they're looking for contractors for civil works, different forms of contract, and then you then respond to that request for proposal or expressions of interest, OIs. Now, what you're responding to is in reflection of what is being asked of you. But for your technical bits and financial bits to be responsive with respect to safeguards, you have to be very, very careful going forward now as regards setting qualities. And I'll be going through those things so you take cognizance of it. I'm sure you would have gone through the entire changes from value for money, traditional procurement, and you'd have heard a lot. But then look at it through the lens of safeguards, if you bear with me. So then from there you submit your bid, we do the bid evaluation, which is the bottom end of the cycle. And then from there, the bid evaluation reports come out. We don't do that. Our borrowers do it because they're sovereign entities on themselves. But we have an obligation for issuing what we call no objection request. So we can object or can't object to what they're doing. And then, of course, the contract then comes into place. So there is a CMP, contract management plan. Some of you may be acting as supervision consultants at that stage, where you'll be working with the borrower, and will be what a framework that gives you the opportunity to be able to peer review and ensure quality with the work. Then at the end, we write what we call project closure report, and then reported lessons that will be learned to be shared. I'll be zooming in very, very quickly, but on the standard bidding document, either for civil works, this is more driven by civil works, and you could be part of that consultancy service, providing quality assurance and quality control for the civil works implementation. We're going to go through some of the sections. Section 3 is very, very important. Section 6 is very important also, and we'll be talking through some of the sections and tell you where the highlights of the MPC criteria are and how you can submit responsive technical proposals that reflect safeguards requirement. These are the key documentations, but that wouldn't help. This is the one I want to highlight for you. And if you look from the top, you have the borrower would have prepared with ADB support a lot of assessments. This is based upon the current safeguard policy statement. So you're not seeing a lot of the terminologies that Beatrice highlighted. So you may have either category A, category B, category C. Just put yourself in the current, because we're not 1st January 2026 yet. And then the borrower would have prepared a lot of management plans that arose from assessments that were done. A lot of you here, you're involved in preparing EIAs, IEs. I can see a lot of few heads nodding, and ESMPs. Now, the management plans that come out of that, they are covenant. They are part of the legal covenant of the legal agreement that we arrive with our borrowers. So you see that there. When you're responding to such proposals, you should look out for those management plans. Because if you don't see the management plans, you would not be able to budget for them. And if you don't budget for them, then it leads into implementation problems. I will pause here and re-emphasize that this is the biggest challenge that we have on our projects and the weakest link in the entire project cycle that you see on the screen. So this is highlighting to you what needs to be done at what stage. So at the very top end of it are the plans that you need to look out for. If they don't come out in the RFP, reach out to the borrower and ask for them. And if they don't, when you go for bidders conference, which a lot of our borrowers organize, please don't feel shy, ask for them. Because when you don't ask for them and you sign that contract, and maybe there is a sentence in there that says that implementation of the EMP or ESMP is inferred on you, but you don't have details of it, so you never made a BOQ line item for it, then when we come out, project becomes problematic because you can't give the right PPEs, you can't give the right adequate resourcing by bringing the right staffing during the construction phase of the project, okay? So we develop plans, but these plans are supposed to be updated by you, consultants, contractors, to make them site-specific. And it's the development of what I'll call the plans into site-specific management plans that then becomes problematic, because we don't know how many excavations you're going to be doing until you win a contract. And we don't know how many working of heights you're going to be doing until you win the contract. We don't know whether you need a labor. Maybe we may infer that you need a labor camp, but we don't know how many and where you're going to be siting them. Your laydown areas, when you are mobilizing, we don't know until you mobilize onto the site. So all of these are going to be developed specific to the project and where the project is going to be sited. And that's the reason why you need to find out. So from procurement to contract award, the site-specific management plans are critically important. And it tells you, borrower, who the client, the contractor, or the consultant if you're working with them. So bid submission evaluation transitions then into contract management. What you don't put in the contract, difficult to implement. That's the key word there again. The next few slides, I'll be flipping through, and Lisa, you tell me how we're doing with time, right? I'll be flipping through some of the forms, which some of you may have seen already if you've submitted any bid to any ADB supported project. You may have seen some, but I'm just going to be highlighting some of them for you. I've highlighted here because this is what FIDIC, the language that FIDIC, and a lot of you would be very familiar with FIDIC, uses. It uses the word EHS, but it's much more broader when it comes into ADB financing project. It just doesn't mean, because when I take only E, environment is quite very broad. Pollution, noise, and then you have health. Health could be public health, but it could also be so many health of environment and others. And then you have now safety, which could also mean security in many cases. So it uses this acronym, but do not let's fixate ourselves within just EHS as it would be in. So qualification. In the past, people would just, the request for proposals will mention the kind of the staffing or the qualification that's required, the expertise that's required. But now the form would require you, whether you're doing it on your own, as a joint venture or JV, to come up with a specific qualification. You have to be very responsive in providing the exact qualification of the personnel that you're bringing onto the site. And this has to be very, very clear, especially where you're having to compete on maybe publicly open intended qualification bidding process. It was also not the case that we requested that you declare your past performance, but now going forward, if you've had, like what you do with credits, those of you, maybe if you have bad credit, you have to now declare it. Does that mean that you will be disqualified? Not necessarily, but it gives us an opportunity to engage with you proactively, to not have to recur what had happened in your previous site. So we're not going to use that against you and say because you performed you had so many fatalities during the project, you destroyed the environment so badly, so we're not going to award a contract to you. No, that's not what the policy says. But non-declaration could lead to disqualification. So you're supposed to tell us. If you don't tell us, that's a crime. But then when you declare how bad it is, that's not really factor into evaluation criteria, at least for now. Okay? Now, I can guarantee you that when we transition into the MPC or merit point criteria or value-based or sustainable-based criteria, that would not be considered. That's something that is still being worked through with our procurement department. I'm sure they may have touched on you when you met with the BOF meetings. So qualification is quite important, and most cases we try to make sure that the best resource is being used for the project, be it consultancy service, be it civil works contractor is being awarded. Then we can go to a few more ones, and I told you I'll be flipping through this because some of you would have seen this form. I'm not going to go into the specifics because we don't have the time. But if you haven't seen it, please, at the end of the training or workshop, please reach out to us. I will point to you and I can share all these templates to you. It's freely available on our web pages anyway. So with regards to safeguards, we ask for specific experience with managing safeguards. And here, the bid should be able to tell you the number of years, minimum number of years. We don't tend to go for maximum, minimum number of years. Certifications, maybe agency organizations, for professional currency, if that is required. that could also be specified in the bid. But we don't say that if you don't have an ISO, maybe 14,100 or any, then you're disqualified. That would be discrimination. Sometimes there will be a clause that says that with national equivalent. So if you're not a member of an OSHA organization somewhere, does not mean that you get disqualified. Okay, I'll flip through here. Then when it comes to evaluation, we said the bid that is not responsive for safeguards now could potentially be rejected. So if you prepare a bid and there is an environmental management plan or environmental social management plan, and the bid is not responsive to that, it will be rejected going forward. And I think this is something that we're working very closely with them, with our borrowers, with a lot of capacity building with how the bid evaluation is done. And I mentioned that ADB, we do not manage the bid process. We have a standard bidding document that guides how the process goes, but we don't manage that. The only maybe input we have here on this report, the bid evaluation report, is a no objection request. So after the borrower or the client have finished the procurement process, they send the evaluation to tell us consultancy A, B, C, or contractor A, B, C, were our preferred bidder, and then we have to review and see whether the process is consistent with the procurement regulations and then the standard bidding document. And based upon that, we can issue a no objection, and then the client or borrower then proceeds. But for you, what you need to take home is that your technical bids has to be responsive for safeguards. Then evaluation criteria, I'll go into it, but I'm not going to go into all the factors that goes into the scoring. Your technical scoring comes first before we go to the financials. So again, I mentioned we're moving into value for money. We don't want to know how much you've costed for the project before we assess your technical capability to deliver the project. And that's what you see here. So D plus E equals F. All I wanted you to know here is that the final score includes your EHS performance and your EHS responsiveness to the bid that you submitted. That's what is important. Mobilization, I'm going to go into flip through some of this very quickly because we're not going into all the nitty-gritty of it. Now, the employer themselves have requirement, which also has to do with EHS. And here the employer is our borrower or our client, if it's a corporate entity in many cases. And all of these are the same, consistent with what our SBD, standard bidding document, also says. So there's no need for you to reflect on this. I'll move straight to Section 8 and 7, which we call the COPA, or Specific Conditions of Contract. So here again, it requires that you should be preparing your site-specific EHS or environmental social management plans as reflected in the project environmental management plan. Then you have to be submitting progress reports. When we put a Menti on, when Lisa put a Menti on for the key challenges, I saw someone mentioned challenge with reporting violations. That was one of the key back, right? So there is also a requirement for you to be reporting on incidents. In the SPS, there is that requirement that when incidents happen on your project, be you a consultant, be you a contractor, you're mandated to keep a record of it and also periodically report to ADB. As Beatrice highlighted in the ESF, we've been going to be very specific on how many days you need to let us know. Because in this day and age of social media, things get out to the public very, very quickly. And it will be quite very embarrassing that we're developing partners, but things are out there, I don't know. Maybe you know about that. Okay? Now, contract forms. We go now to contract awards. So let's say you're happy. I'm going to be flipping through. Congratulations to you. You won the contract. Happy days. So what happens next? There are a few things you need to plan from now on to when you go to the site. These slides will be shared with you, so you could come with me. I'm not going to be moving through, but I'll try as much as possible to leave some time for you to ask questions. You have to mobilize to the site. It calls for a lot of planning. If you're consultancy, major contract, then there is a lot of planning that has to go into it. When do you bring your staff to the site? And who do you bring first, for instance? We have people that contract says a safeguard specialist has been given 60-person days. We used to say man days. I'm not going to say that. 60-person days. But then you deploy this resource to the project when you don't need that resource. That's bad planning. And then you realize that when civil works has now peaked, you need the person is run out of days. So when you even deploy a service, it's very important, and that's why planning comes in. I'm not going to bring someone onto the project and start paying him or her when I don't need that resource on site. And we tend to see that a lot in our civil works. So planning, making sure the resources are in place at the right time are very, very critical so that you can manage the risks that have been identified in your management plans. Your CMP or the contract management plan is critical. And there was an audit that was done recently by our audit department, and shockingly, a lot of our projects don't have CMPs finalized or cleared by ADB or in place even to manage the project. That was quite a very big shocking thing. So there are a few things we're doing, and I've mentioned all of this already: how you set up the site induction toolbox, how you prepare your site-specific management plans, calls for a lot of planning. If you don't plan, you have inadvertently planned to fail. And that's just what it is. If you don't plan, then you've already planned, whether you know it or not, to fail. And that's what happens a lot on our project sites. Project-affected persons or communities see that there's something going on when they see the fantastic high vis of the contractor. And then that leads already to complaint. So when do you even notify communities that surround you that civil works are about to start? All of those things requires a lot of detailed planning. Then I've talked about letting us know what is happening, and that is submission of progress report. And that's what you see here. This is a template on what goes into a progress report. But based upon the financing modality that you're using, the risk category that has been assigned to your project, there will be mandatory requirements on when you have to tell us what's going on. It could be quarterly report during civil works. It could be annual report, which is most typical. Or it could be biannual report that you have to submit to us. And it's all part of the contract management planning. And then this is maybe a very nice checklist to gauge your readiness. And if you go through this, most likely, you're likely to be ready to mobilize to site and do your work, and hopefully you can manage the risks during the construction phase. This last slide tells you there are many players that come in, says it takes a village. We don't tend to continue, but one of the wisest people who ever lived, I don't mention the name, says it takes one person or two people to bring up a child, but it takes a village to raise that child, which goes to emphasize that when you see a project going on, there's so many people that come together. And the work that you play, either as a consultant, a contractor, is a key player in this space. And maybe we can pause and ask some few questions if you have many ones. Stay within time, right? If you have any questions, maybe you can ask me, because I was trying to flip through the slides. We could share that with you, but I'd like to hear from you more. If you've been part of these 2-3 days already, a lot would have been said to you with procurement. But here we're preaching the same procurement, but within the lens of safeguards. And that's uniquely different. So if you have any questions, you could ask them. Or sharing any experiences, or you're terrified with the value for money procurement criteria that is coming, and you don't know what will be like. We can share whatever experiences or whatever thoughts we have already with you. Yes, thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm Rochelle Venida, and I'm from the DT Global Asia Pacific. We're consultants. And the group where I am in, we're doing like more of construction supervision, project management. So, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's fantastic. My question is about, because the one that you presented earlier on the forms, I believe it's more of the contractor forms, so it's not more of the like the consulting proposal for consultants. My question is, will you be like assigning a certain percentage on the, because normally when you do the when the methodology would include the yes, the ESMS and everything that needs to be done on the environment and social side. So are you planning, or is there any, or it has already been implemented the certain points in the methodology specific for the environment and ESHS, for example? Yeah, thank you.
Good question. DT Global, you said, right?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Now, and this is one of the questions that I think have been asked a few times, so I'm happy you're raising it. And apologies, we envisage we're going to have a lot of contractors, which is why you saw the standard bidding form focusing on contractors, and that is uniquely different for consultancy services, right? But you work very, very closely with these contractors. So as a supervision consultant, you are there in the finished contract arrangement, working with them, and so you know these forms as well. In terms of the evaluation, there are going to be points. Currently, I told you one of the first things that were done when we revised the standard bidding document was to mandate declaration. There was not going to be points for declaration, but you have to declare it because it was seen to be quite early stages, and there were a few concerns that were raised by our borrowers. Now, moving into the value for money MPC or merit point criteria evaluation, there are going to be points. But those points will factor into the evaluation. I can't tell you the specific because all of this will be determined on case-by-case basis at the strategic procurement planning stage when we conceptualize the project. Each project will be different. For very high, what we call high-value civil-based project, and this will be internationally advertised projects, those will be firmed up quite very upstream. So the quantities into how many percentages goes into here, there will be firmed up as part of the upstream procurement planning stages. So for some, if we envisage that the ENS elements are not going to be so much of a risk, those percentage weightings will be smaller. But for those ones that we think these are very heavy infrastructure projects and the impact could be quite very significant, what we call high risk procurement target project, then those percentages will be higher in terms of the evaluation. But what is now very clear, and I can tell you, they will be non-price. So we're taking them out of the price basket. So when we look at your technique, we do the evaluation, you come into the pricing, they will be non-price. We're not looking for reflections in the financing proposals that you submit. Does that answer your question? Yeah. No, Kasieshi, I think you want to come in on that, and then you come in. Yeah, then Kasieshi will come up.
Are we going back to the QBS type of evaluation? Because like what we have receiving for proposal, it's mostly QCBS. So are you saying that we're going back to the QBS? Because I know like years ago, most of the evaluation system was QCBS. I mean QBS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, we're not going back to it. I think it's a consolidation or enhancement of the QBS process, where now we're looking at additional criteria to factor into the overall evaluation process. Yeah. But we're not going back to it and say, oh, what we're currently, no. I think this is going to be, the difficulty maybe is presenting to a lot of people is that there isn't a one fixed template that is being given to you. It's going to be done on case-by-case basis, especially based upon risk criteria that the borrower and the project team all going to be working on really upstream. But it will be made very transparent in the RFQ that will be issued. So when you see a request for proposals, the valuation methodology will be clear. It has to be transparent. And you see that maybe two projects will be having different valuations responding to the EHS based upon the risk that is assigned to the project.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kasia, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Just to add what Felix was saying, that we are working with our safeguards office, working with the procurement team, and we are updating all standard bidding documents, including ones for the contractors and contracting firms. So another point is that on 16th of September, I don't know if you heard, there was an announcement that ADB will be moving forward from 1st January 2026, that all the international contract advertised to be financed by ADB will be using the merit point criteria. So it's a lot of work actually on the background going on with the procurement teams. Thank you.
I would say the takeaway is now is different from what it used to be, in that you need to really look at broader criteria and read the RFPs very, very carefully and make sure you are responsive globally. Now the terminology is ESG, and it has been around for a long time. But from us, from Safeguard's perspective, I say look at the EHS element properly and respond accordingly. Okay. If you don't have one in-house, because that's tends to be the problem, you have a commercial person and you have a financial guru who give you all the modeling, tell you what the returns on investments are, please, it would not hurt you if you get a consultant to respond to the EHS or ESG element as well. So you make sure the bits that you turn in are Safeguards responsive. Okay. Any other question? Someone else has a burning question? I'm sure you walk out here, you feel more confident submitting bids from last year. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So we're going to break for coffee. But please take the opportunity to chat with our staff. They're all here at the table. Maybe if you're shy to ask a question in the group, you can chat individually with people over the coffee break. And we'll be back to start at 10:15. So we'll take 15 minutes. Thank you.